Rain had been falling since sunrise, wrapping the small coastal town in a stillness that made everything feel frozen in time. Streets shimmered with silver pools of water, and the windows of the weathered inn glowed like faded memories, half visible, half forgotten. Sarah pressed her palm against the cool glass of their room and watched raindrops race each other down toward the wooden frame. This was her first real getaway in nearly a year, a simple weekend escape with just her and her 12-year-old son, Noah, and the ocean neither of them had seen since he was very small. But the quiet carried weight. There was something about stillness that made all the buried things in her heart begin to rise again. The thoughts she'd hidden beneath work schedules, school runs, and forced optimism. She missed hearing laughter fill the rooms of their home. She missed having someone to share the silence with after Noah went to bed. And she missed the woman she used to be, the one who believed she had everything figured out. The inn was humble, tucked along a forgotten stretch of road near the shore. Its wallpaper showed a faded floral pattern that looked decades old, and the furniture creaked gently when touched, but it had character, and a peace Sarah hadn't felt in a long time. Noah sat cross-legged on the bed, sketching something in his notebook. He was a quiet boy, thoughtful, imaginative, always wandering somewhere inside his own mind. Since the divorce, he'd grown even more silent. She worried sometimes that he was drifting to a place she couldn't reach. "Want to head downstairs later?" she asked gently. "They have hot chocolate in the lobby." Noah glanced up and offered a small smile. "Maybe after I finish this," he said, holding up his pencil like an artist holding a brush. She smiled back. "All right, Picasso." He laughed quietly and returned to his drawing. For a moment, the rhythm of rain on glass became their only conversation. A mother and her son wrapped in a small room, searching for warmth in the middle of a storm. Then Sarah noticed something, a flicker of stillness that made her pause. Noah had stopped drawing. His pencil rested motionless against the page, and his gaze had drifted, not toward her, not toward the window, but toward the tall antique mirror beside the old dresser. The glass reflected the soft glow of the bedside lamp, their luggage in the corner, the edge of the quilt, and Noah's face. He stared at his reflection without blinking, completely still. At first, Sarah thought nothing of it. Children daydream. But there was something different about the way he looked. Focused yet distant, as if listening to something only he could hear. "Noah," she said softly, "everything okay?" He blinked slowly, like someone waking from a trance. "Yeah," he murmured. "Just thinking," she smiled, but her heart tugged with quiet concern. He'd been carrying a lot lately. She often caught him staring out car windows or sitting in silence long after meals, his expression unreadable. She wanted to ask more, but something in his tone told her to wait. Instead, she reached over and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "You think too much, you know that?" He gave a small grin. "Maybe I get it from you." That made her laugh, though her chest ached with the truth of it. Part 2, the mirror's strange pull. As the night deepened, the rain softened into something gentler, more lullaby than storm. Sarah sat by the bedside lamp with a novel she wasn't really reading. The air smelled faintly of salt and aged wood. Noah eventually drifted off to sleep, his sketchbook open beside him. She rose quietly and tucked the blanket around his shoulders, her eyes lingering on his peaceful face, so calm, yet shadowed by thoughts he never spoke aloud. When she switched off the lamp, the room dimmed into silvery light from the street lamp outside. That's when she noticed his reflection again. He was asleep, but the image in the glass seemed somehow alert. The expression didn't match, like the mirror was holding something different. She blinked, startled. The image returned to normal, just her boy fast asleep. She shook her head and smiled at herself. "I'm just tired," she thought. Still, as she sat on the edge of her bed, something lingered. Not fear exactly, but a strange tenderness, as if the mirror wasn't showing her something frightening, but something hidden. An emotion too deep for words. She looked once more at Noah and whispered, "You look so much like him." Her voice caught on the name she didn't say. Noah's father. For a moment, the glass seemed to shimmer with the echo of that memory. A family that once was. Love that had faded but not disappeared. Then the rain softened into silence. Sarah lay down, eyes half closed, feeling both comforted and uneasy, as if the room itself had heard what her heart whispered, but her voice couldn't. And somewhere between waking and sleep, she thought she heard a faint sound. Noah's voice, gentle and low, murmuring something in his dreams. She didn't catch the words, but the mirror, faintly catching the dim light, almost looked as if it had. Part 3. Morning light and distant memories. Morning light crept into the room like a quiet visitor, brushing over the curtains and filling the air with warmth. Sarah stirred awake to the distant sound of waves, a sound she hadn't heard in years. For a moment, she didn't move. She just listened. The rain had stopped. The sky outside looked washed clean, soft and pale. Noah was still sleeping, his face turned toward the window, breathing slowly. Seeing him like that always made her heart ache in a strange, tender way, as though he carried not just her features but her memories too. Her eyes drifted again to the mirror. In the morning light it looked ordinary, just a simple frame holding a reflection of their quiet morning. But something about it stirred an old feeling she hadn't visited in years. Maybe it wasn't the mirror that unsettled her. Maybe it was what it reminded her of. She remembered another morning, another room, long before the storms, the separations, the silence. She was 24 then, full of ideas about who she might become. She'd just finished university and taken a job at a small independent bookstore in Portland. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. She loved the smell of old pages and coffee, the hush of quiet afternoons when customers browsed in comfortable silence and she stayed late to organize displays that might catch someone's eye. That's where she met Michael. He was a freelance photographer who came in regularly, quiet and thoughtful, with a gentle smile that appeared whenever their eyes met across the store. Their conversations started with small things, book recommendations, weather complaints, favorite authors. But over time, the space between words grew warm. They began meeting for coffee after her shifts, trading stories about childhood dreams and half-finished projects. She remembered how he used to leave small Polaroid photos on the counter, tiny snapshots of clouds or street corners or shadows shaped like question marks. He'd leave them when she wasn't looking. It was never declared, never dramatic, just small, everyday gestures that stitched something gentle between them. One rainy afternoon, not unlike this one, they stayed late organizing a book display. The store was empty, the lights dim, and the city outside looked like it was underwater. She remembered him glancing up from arranging books and saying, "I think people only notice how beautiful the world is when it's a little broken." She didn't know why that stayed with her. Maybe because it felt true. They never really confessed anything. They didn't have to. The understanding was there in the way their silences fit together. But life, as it often does, moved faster than they were ready for. An opportunity opened for Michael, a chance to travel for work, documenting remote communities across South America. A bigger project, a brighter future. He took it, and Sarah, who had just signed a lease and couldn't imagine leaving yet, stayed behind. There was no fight, no promise, no goodbye that could carry the weight of what they both felt but never named. They just drifted apart gently, like leaves caught in separate currents. For years afterward, she'd catch herself wondering how he was. Once she even saw his name credited in a photography exhibition and smiled to herself. Life had moved on. She'd met Noah's father, fallen in love again, built a family, and learned what heartbreak really meant. But sometimes, when the world grew quiet, her mind would return to that bookstore window, to the sound of rain on glass, and the man who once looked at her like she was more than her mistakes. Now, standing in the soft glow of this unfamiliar room, Sarah felt the echo of that time ripple through her, not in sadness, but in recognition. A gentle reminder that love, in all its shapes and seasons, never truly leaves us. It changes, it hides, it waits inside the quiet moments when we least expect to feel it again. Noah stirred in bed, yawning. "Morning, Mom, morning, sweetheart." He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "You were up early." "The sea woke me," she said softly. "It's been a while since I've heard it." Noah looked at the mirror across the room, the same way he had last night. His expression turned thoughtful. "Mom," he said, "do you ever think mirrors remember things?" She blinked. "What do you mean? Like not just what they see right now, but what they've seen before. Like they hold it all inside." Her heart fluttered with quiet recognition. She glanced at her own reflection beside his. Mother and son, two stories layered by time and love. "Maybe they do," she whispered. "Maybe that's why it's hard to look too long." Noah smiled faintly, and she could see her younger self in that smile, curious, hopeful, full of wonder. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, touching the ocean with gold. Sarah exhaled slowly, feeling the past settle gently inside her like a tide returning home. Some reflections, she thought, aren't meant to be escaped. They're meant to remind us how far we've come. Part 4, An Unexpected Encounter. The sky had cleared by afternoon, revealing a calm blue that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Sarah and Noah walked along the wooden boardwalk, the world around them glistening from the morning rain. Noah walked a few steps ahead, balancing on the edge of the railing. "Mom, look, the water's so clear," he called, his voice full of life. She smiled. It felt good to hear that kind of excitement from him again, something light, something unburdened. She took a slow breath, letting the sea air fill her lungs. For the first time in a while, the heaviness inside her began to ease. That's when she heard someone call her name. Sarah? She turned, and for a heartbeat, time folded in on itself. Standing near the cafe entrance was a man with wind-tossed hair, a familiar half-smile, and a look of startled recognition in his eyes. Michael. It had been over a decade since she'd last seen him, but in that instant all the years seemed to vanish. He looked older, of course, lines around his eyes, gray threading through his hair, but there was still that same quiet steadiness about him. Michael, she breathed, unsure if she was saying it aloud or just thinking it. He laughed softly, that same easy sound she remembered from long ago. I thought that was you. I almost didn't believe it. They stood for a moment, smiling through the disbelief. What are you doing here? She asked. Photography workshop at the community center, he said, gesturing lightly toward the building behind him. Came out for coffee and... He smiled. Apparently a memory, she laughed, not loudly, but the kind of laugh that escapes when surprise meets warmth. Noah wandered back, curious. Hi, he said politely. Michael's face softened. Hey there, I'm Michael. I'm Noah. The three of them stood there in the sunlight, an unexpected triangle of past and present. Part 5. Conversations that heal. They sat outside the cafe, sipping warm drinks while the ocean glimmered beyond. The conversation came easily. Small talk, old memories, comfortable pauses that only happened between people who once understood each other deeply. I still remember the way you used to stay late at the bookstore, Michael said, smiling faintly. You'd pretend it was because you were focused, but really you just didn't want to go home yet. Sarah laughed softly, guilty. And you'd take photos of random things instead of actually shopping for books. He grinned. I called it creative observation. Their laughter was gentle, the kind that carries both nostalgia and the quiet ache of years lost. After a moment, Michael glanced toward Noah, who was busy stirring whipped cream into his hot chocolate. He looks a lot like you, he said quietly. Sarah followed his gaze. He's got his father's calmness, but yes, he's mine through and through. Michael nodded, smiling. You always said you wanted to raise someone who saw the world with wonder. Looks like you did. That line made her heart swell unexpectedly. It had been a long time since someone noticed the kind of person she was trying to be, not the employee, not the mother rushing through tasks, but her. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It felt alive, full of what was said and what remained unsaid. When Noah excused himself to explore a nearby gift shop, Sarah and Michael stayed seated, their eyes following him. Do you ever think about those days? Michael asked quietly. She smiled. Sometimes, especially when it rains. He chuckled. Still poetic? Still taking photos? She countered. Always, he said, lifting his cup. Just on bigger assignments now. They shared a smile that lingered just a moment longer than it needed to. Not in longing, but in recognition. The years had changed them, shaped them, softened their edges. But there was still a quiet thread between them, woven through memory and time. Sarah looked toward the ocean, her voice gentle. It's strange. I used to wonder what I'd say if I ever saw you again. I imagined it would be harder. And is it? She thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, it feels peaceful. Michael nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that's what time does. It turns what hurt into something that just hums softly in the background. She met his eyes. Like a song we almost forgot. For a long moment they sat without speaking, just watching the light dance across the water. When Noah returned holding a seashell and a grin, Michael stood. It was really good to see you again, Sarah, truly. You too, she said, meaning it. As he walked away, she felt a quiet warmth rise in her chest. Not regret, not longing, but gratitude. Noah looked up at her curiously. Who was that man, Mom? She smiled softly. An old friend. Someone who reminded me how far we've come. He tilted his head. Did you miss him? She looked out toward the sea. Once. But I think the heart has a way of keeping what matters, even when people drift away. The waves rolled in, soft and steady, echoing the rhythm of her thoughts. The past hadn't come back to change her life, only to remind her how much she had already grown. Part 6. Evening Revelations. Evening came softly, carrying the golden hush of a setting sun. The sky outside their window was brushed in pink and amber, like watercolor on glass. Sarah stood near the mirror again, brushing through her hair, though her eyes kept drifting toward the reflection of the ocean behind her. It had been a full day, not heavy, but meaningful in the kind of way that makes the heart ache with quiet recognition. Seeing Michael again had stirred something she thought had long settled. Not romantic longing, but the realization of who she had been and who she had become. She didn't regret their goodbye. She didn't even wish for more time. What she felt was gratitude, for the chance to remember that a person's story doesn't end when someone leaves. It keeps growing, learning, softening, in unexpected ways. Noah sat on the bed reading a small travel brochure. The evening light touched his face, and Sarah saw with startling clarity how much he'd changed in the past year. The way his shoulders had straightened, his voice had deepened, his thoughts seemed to reach beyond his age. "Mom," he said suddenly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." He hesitated. "When you looked at that man today, you looked sad, were you?" She paused, caught off guard by his sensitivity, maybe a little, but not in a bad way. He looked at her reflection in the mirror. "Was he someone important?" "Yes," she said softly. "A long time ago, before you were born." He nodded, thinking. "Did you love him?" She smiled faintly. "Yes, in a quiet way. But sometimes love isn't about forever. It's about learning who we are when we care for someone." Noah looked at her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he said something that caught her completely off guard. "Maybe that's what Dad was trying to tell me." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" He looked back toward the mirror, the same one that had unsettled her that first night. "That night when I said I saw something, I didn't really see a person, Mom. I felt something. Like someone wanted to tell you not to feel guilty anymore." Her throat tightened. Noah continued softly. "I think Dad just wanted you to be happy again. Even if it's with memories, not with him." Tears filled her eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming tenderness of it. She walked over and sat beside him, wrapping her arms gently around his shoulders. "Do you know something?" she whispered. "You're braver than you realize." He leaned into her. "Maybe mirrors do remember things," he said with a small smile. "But maybe they also show us what we need to forgive." Sarah looked at their reflection, mother and son side by side, bathed in the soft glow of evening. For the first time in a long while, she didn't see regret in her own face. She saw peace. Part 7. The Journey Home. Later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Sarah sat alone by the window, listening to the waves outside. Her thoughts drifted back to Michael, his kind smile, his steady voice, and the simple truth in his words. Time hummed softly in the background. She realized something then. Every person she had loved, her ex-husband, her son, even Michael, had been a reflection of different seasons of her heart. Each had taught her something about patience, forgiveness, and courage. She walked toward the mirror one last time and met her own gaze. The woman looking back wasn't the same as the one who had checked into this inn 3 days ago. Her eyes still carried traces of sorrow, but there was strength behind them now. The kind that comes from accepting that life moves forward whether we're ready or not. She whispered softly to her reflection, "Thank you for reminding me who I am." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of the ocean, steady, eternal, like the rhythm of healing itself. The next morning, sunlight poured into the room. Sarah and Noah packed their bags quietly, leaving behind the scent of sea air and rain-soaked memories. Before they left, Noah paused at the door. "Mom, do you think we'll ever come back here?" She smiled, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. "Maybe one day. But I think we're taking the best part of it with us already." He looked up. "The mirror?" She laughed softly. "No, sweetheart, the truth." As they walked down the hallway, Sarah felt lighter than she had in years. The past hadn't vanished, it had simply settled where it belonged. And as they stepped out into the morning light, she realized that the reflection she'd been searching for wasn't in the mirror at all. It was walking right beside her, in the hopeful eyes of her son, in the quiet acceptance of her heart, and in the promise that love, in all its forms, never truly fades. It simply transforms into something we carry with us, gentle, enduring, and forever present in the mirrors of memory.